Picture, if you will, the snug seclusion of a candle-lit study at Gaylord College, Oxbridge, on a stormy night in late December, almost 100 years ago, where Oxbridge academic and confirmed bachelor, the Reverend Professor Dr. Montgomery Mablethorpe Zoomer, is seated on a Chesterfield wing-back chair before a roaring log fire to share the ritual of ghost stories over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop with his coterie of young, fresh-faced student acolytes. Setting aside his cup of steaming punch, he opens the dusty tome that rests upon his knees and begins to read in a mellifluous voice.
The Cock That Crowed by J.R. Dullard, a Victorian ghost story of sorts in the oral tradition as read by Sir Christopher Lurch.
Our extraordinary tale begins with the unexpected arrival of the postman. As unaccustomed as the aspiring author, one Christian Elias Charity, was to receiving any missive other than from his creditors, you can no doubt imagine his surprise in receiving not one, but two unexpected, though heartily welcome notices on that otherwise wet and dreary October morning. The first was word from a small but reputable publisher commissioning a proposed novel on the strength of 10,000 beautifully crafted words and an intriguing synopsis. The second letter informed him of a sizable endowment resulting from his late uncle's passing that had effectively secured his future financial independence. Given that Christian had risen that very morning with the sole intention of taking a leisurely stroll down by the Thames before throwing himself off Tower Bridge, so discouraged and mentally fatigued was he, not only by his lack of literary success, but also the profligate habits and desultory lifestyle he had adopted, you would understand how miraculous the unexpected news was and why it so affected him. The publisher's commission meant he could finally be regarded as a professional author, whilst the latter meant he could retreat again to the country to create his masterpiece and renounce the disreputable society that he had fallen into. He was a country gent, born and bred on a farm and of Anglo-Saxon stock. This heredity was clearly indicated by his flaxen hair and Viking physique. He had only ventured up to the smoke to further his literary career, but the unceasing slog and lack of success had taken its toll on him both physically and emotionally. Here, at last, came his reclamation, and he was soon scouring the letting section of the East London Advertiser for a suitable country retreat, and quickly found one in Kent that seemed perfect for his needs. No sooner had he laid his eyes on Airy Bush Farm than he had fallen in love, for indeed it was both airy and had bushes. Situated only half a mile from the local railway station, it was an impressive erection with a pleasant aspect, twin projecting gables, a small holding, and was fully furnished and had servants in situ. He signed the lease forthwith and had installed himself and his meagre array of worldly goods by the beginning of December. It was a week into his residency when the rapping of knuckles on the study door forced Christian to lift his head from his manuscript in progress and reluctantly swivel on his captain's chair away from his desk and his labours to meet the unwelcome disturbance. "Come in." His housekeeper, Mrs. Hatchett, stood in the open doorway, dressed in her customary funereal garb and exhibiting all the joie de vivre of a gloomy portrait in a dark and dusty corridor. "You have a visitor, sir. It's—" The jovial figure that swept past her with hand outstretched and dressed in a suit of grey flannel and carrying a silver-tipped and sizable swagger stick said, without turning back, "Could you bring us some tea, me dear, and a tot of whisky for medicinal purposes?" He grinned at Christian with a twinkle in his eye. Mrs. Hatchett bared her teeth in an approximation of a smile that looked more like a threat and departed with a curt nod to the doctor's back. "Hello, hello," said his guest, grasping Christian's hand in his own and shaking it violently. "Dr. De Quincey Loveladdy at your service. But please do call me Dr. Loveladdy." "Pray do take a seat," Christian said, without enthusiasm. The doctor pulled up a chair and joined him at the desk. He was a fine, brawny fellow in his early 50s, vital and athletic, square-headed and square-shouldered, with a Van Dyke beard and an impressive moustache curled and wasped at the extremities. "Please forgive the intrusion, but I felt compelled to make your acquaintance. Your aunt is a friend of mutual friends and wrote to me regarding your whereabouts and suggested I look in on you. I hope I'm not disturbing your labours." Christian waved faintly at his manuscript. "Actually," he said, "I'm a writer, and I am rather engrossed." Oblivious to the implication, the doctor plucked a monogrammed cigarette case from the silk-lined interior of his jacket and clicked open the lid, offering the contents to Christian, who declined to take part with a shake of his head. "Mind if I indulge?" asked the doctor. "Be my guest," Christian replied, at which the doctor produced a long, thin brown and what would prove to be an exceedingly pungent Russian cigarette from its casing, and, striking a match on the rough undersole of his shoe, lit it with a flourish. "Helps clear the lungs," he beamed and inhaled languidly. "So you're a writer, eh? So am I." Christian rolled his eyeballs, having heard the claim repeated ad nauseum, but the doctor continued enthusiastically. "I'm writing a novel as we speak. Well, not literally. I'm sat here talking to you, of course. But I'm thinking about it. Well, I've an idea for one. Well, I do always write my own prescriptions, sometimes, mostly illegibly. Sometimes I leave it to the practice nurse. Neat a hand, don't you know? But I always make a mental note of my creative ideas. Indeed I do, when I remember. I'm sure you will agree there aren't enough hours in the day sometimes to shit, shower and shave, never mind create." The doctor chuckled with vulgar good humour. Christian was saved from having to reply by the reappearance of Mrs. Hatchett with tea tray, complete with whisky decanter in hand. She strode to the desk and glared at Christian until he made a space on the desk amongst his papers, at which point she slammed it down so that the crockery rattled and, with a snort of derision, turned and left the gentleman alone, banging the door shut behind her. "You must excuse my housekeeper," Christian said apologetically. "No, not at all, not at all. I've known Gwendolen for years," the doctor replied, picking up the teapot and indicating with a nod that he should be mother. "Hard to believe she was once a gay, happy soul and full of the milk of human kindness, but she was, you know. Ah, poor, poor Gwen. She has never recovered from the loss of her only son in strange and mysterious circumstances." "I had no idea. You mean he's dead?" Christian loudly ejaculated. The doctor tipped a generous measure of whisky from the decanter into his cup. "Not necessarily," he sighed. "If only it were that simple. No, she put him somewhere one night, and a short time later realised she'd forgotten where she'd put him. Lost, you see. Never been seen from that day to this." He took a sip of tea with raised pinky. Christian knotted his brow and looked at the doctor incredulously. The doctor smiled. "Ah, but I'm sure you'll find that odd. Exceedingly odd, no doubt. Yet there are odder events that take place out here in the county, away from the prying eyes of city folk, I can assure you." The doctor let his statement hang ominously in the air as he added a further dash of whisky to his cup. Sipping it, he nodded approvingly. "Your aunt informed me of your convalescence and desire to recuperate here in our humble hamlet. Tell me, is the country air agreeing with you?" "Yes, so far. I am feeling much improved. Christian nodded. "And I do seem to have regained my appetite. Mrs. Hatchett may not be the most agreeable of housekeepers, but she's a damn fine cook. That cannot be denied." He stirred his tea. "Though I would benefit from more sleep, if I'm honest." "You have trouble sleeping?" probed the doctor. "It's that bally rooster," Christian complained. "Cock-a-doodle doing outside my bedroom window every bally morning just before dawn. Will not shut up until I've thrown a boot at it and knocked it off the garden fence. At this rate I'll have no boots left, for it doesn't learn. Back the next morning as bold and incommodious as any brass band." "I could prescribe a sleeping draught," offered the doctor. "Sleeping is not the problem," Christian replied. "It's the being woken up. I must need have a word with Cluke, the groundsman, see if there's anything he can do. He is meant to be in charge of the livestock, after all." "Good luck with that," the doctor muttered archly. Christian took out his pocket watch and looked at it pointedly. Taking the hint, Loveladdie put aside his cup and saucer, stood and handed Christian his card. "At your service, Mr. Charity. Contact me day or night. Oh, and expect an invitation to dinner later this week. I'd be delighted if you do this crusty old bachelor the honour of your presence. I don't get many visitors, but my cook is more than a match for Gwendolen, and significantly better tempered. Also, I do have some literature in my collection that I suspect will be very much of interest to a young gentleman of your persuasion." And with a wink and a shake of his hand, the doctor left a bemused Christian to go back to his literary activities. The afternoon flew by in a burst of creativity, and Christian realized he had yet again worked up quite the appetite as he sat down that evening to dine. Mrs. Hatchett did not disappoint with a meal that was more like a feast. He felt replete when he finally finished, but in such good humour that he ventured a joke as Mrs. Hatchett cleared the last of the dishes. "By Jove," he remarked, "anyone would believe you are intent on fattening me up for Christmas." Mrs. Hatchett regarded him with stony silence. "Just jesting, Mrs. Hatchett," he apologised, without being quite sure what he was apologising for. She exited without a word, pushing a housemaid's trolley purposefully before her. "Bugger this," he muttered to himself as he got to his feet. The need for more convivial company prompted him to venture to the local village tavern for a snifter or two. He had exchanged pleasantries with the burly landlord of the Barmaid's Apron upon entering, then spent an agreeable hour sitting quietly in a corner of the inn, surrounded by the amiable hubbub of the other patrons, before heading homeward. As he exited, he lit his pipe and, turning up the collar of his overcoat, set off on the short stroll home. The moon shone with a cold crystalline light upon the country lane leading back towards Airy Bush Farm, illuminating the trees and hedges and fields either side. The warm yellow glow that emanated from the hostelry was soon left at his rear end, and he entered into an environment of utter silence. It was a lovely night, one not for sleep but for trysting lovers, canoodling under the stars, Christian imagined, though in truth he had little experience of the like beyond his fertile imagination. He turned towards the stile opening upon a path, joining the footway that afforded him a shortcut back to the farm. It was then he first fixed his gaze on the great dark man. If a man could be described as beautiful, then the figure that sat atop the stile was the apotheosis. Christian had later wondered why he was not afraid to come upon a stranger on that lonely country road, but in truth he was too in awe of the virile yet sensitive swarthy countenance that had turned soulful dark brown eyes towards him as he approached. "It's a nice night for it," the stranger remarked. "It's a nice night for what?" Christian spluttered. The stranger looked up into the clear night sky. "Oh, you know, gazing up at the stars and taking one's mind out of the gutter," he replied with a wan smile. Christian made to pass by him and cross over the stile. "Then I shall leave you to your thoughts without disturbance and bid you good night, sir." The stranger lay a gentle hand on Christian's shoulders as he passed, and he felt as though a bolt of electricity had passed through his entire body, so that his extremities now tingled. "Nay, please tarry a while. It's not often I'm in company." Christian looked at him curiously. That so beauteous a man would not be the toast of any social gathering was hard to believe. "But I forget myself. We have yet to be introduced. My name, sir, is Peregrine Falcon, Perry for short. And I am Christian Charity. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Falcon." "Perry, please," came the reply, and as the two men shook hands, another jolt passed through Christian's entire length. He decided to stay. It was past midnight when Christian finally snuffed out his bedside candle and settled down under the eiderdown to sleep, but he could not help reflecting on the social intercourse that had recently passed between Peregrine and himself. Their encounter had felt like a strange form of courtship. What folly, what nonsense, thought Christian. Yet their encounter, as delightful as it had been, was full of oddities. Perry would not disclose where he lived or what occupation he pursued. Moreover, he had begged Christian not to reveal their assignation to anyone or ask after him in the village. He would not explain why, but assured Christian they would meet again upon the stile. And so it was that the great dark man pursued him like a phantom through his dreams. Christian awoke more than unusually fagged out and more annoyed than ever to find his blissful sleep disturbed by the trumpeting of the rooster. He dressed in hot haste, grabbed an umbrella from the hall stand, and ventured forth into the mist of a showery dawn. He found Igor Kluk, the groundsman, mucking out the stables. His surly manner was more than a match for Mrs. Hatchett, and he clearly did not enjoy being interrupted in his duties either. He had the face of a waxwork toad, 3 wispy strands of hair arranged across his otherwise bald pate to approximate a full head of hair, red-armed, rough-handed, uncouth, and with the unmistakable smell of drink about him. He rested his pitchfork and deigned to turn his head, fixing Christian with a bloodshot eye. "Now about your cock, Mr. Kluk," Christian began. "Which cock?" "There be many cocks on this small holding," young Master Kluk replied with an insolent sneer. "The big one." "Plenty of big cocks, sir. Could you be more specific?" "The noisy one," Christian barked. "The one that bellows outside my bedroom window every morning just before dawn." "Ah, Rufus you'll be meaning. What of him?" "He crows," Christian complained. "It's what they do, sir. Cocks crow. It's in the very nature of every cock, big and small. A rooster crows because he has an internal clock that helps him anticipate sunrise." "That is a maybe, but I wake up with the cock every morning." "And what do you want me to do about that, sir?" "Shut the cock up." "And how do you suggest I do that, sir?" Christian felt himself becoming increasingly flustered and annoyed by Kluk's truculent manner. "I think that is rather your area of expertise, sir. What do you advise?" "I'd advise you to go to bed earlier, sir," Kluk replied dryly. "But then I always welcome a new perspective, sir." I refuse to have my timetable dictated by any cock or bally internal clock. Turn his coop into a black box or place a sock over his head. That should reset his timepiece. Won't do, sir. Rufus is responsible for protecting his flock. He crows to inform the flock of potential hazards. Can't do that if he can't see to do it. And what hazards are there exactly to be found on a small holding in the middle of nowhere? Klook scratched his head carefully so as not to dislodge his creative hairstyle. Ah, well, there be predators, see, foxes, poachers. We're never truly safe, are we, sir? Not nowhere, none of us. I'll take it under advisement, Mr. Klook, but please try to find a solution, will you? I'll ask about the village. Thank you, Christian replied derisively, and with a toss of his blonde quiff, followed his rumbling belly back to the house and the promise of the delicious breakfast that awaited him there. But the cock was not to be silenced. Indeed, if anything, it grew louder with each passing day. Yet, with each passing day, Christian grew increasingly more accustomed to the disturbance as one might who lived on a busy thoroughfare grow used to the unremitting clatter of hoofs upon cobblestones. And each day he awoke more languid and desirous of sleep than the day before. As good as his word, Dr. Loveladdy's invitation to dinner arrived by messenger that afternoon. Obliged, but with little eagerness, Christian responded in the affirmative by return, and 2 nights later found himself at the doctor's table. The food, if not the conversation, was entirely satisfactory, and Christian's appetite ensured that there was not one Brussels sprout left in the tureen, or the crumb of a cracker on the cheese board. The 2 men retired to the library, and Christian seated himself in a comfortable armchair, whilst the doctor unlocked his tantalus and took the whisky decanter from it. Having sniffed the crystal stopper and savoured its aroma, he poured 2 large measures, handing one to Christian before snuggling down in the armchair opposite. Nothing more cosy than to be sitting on a winter's night before the open fire enjoying good company, what? Christian scanned the room for the good company to whom the doctor referred, and having failed to find it, drank from his tumbler. The doctor took a sip. Special reserve, he said, admiring the amber liquid as it glinted in the firelight. Keep it in reserve for special guests only, he chuckled. Christian nodded politely. It was indeed a superior blend that warmed his gullet and emboldened him. You never married, he found himself saying. The doctor looked surprised. No, he admitted. No, but I did have a friend once. He too lived at Airybush Farm, as it happens. What happened to your friend? He inquired. He died. An uncomfortable silence ensued. Finally, the doctor smiled good-naturedly and changed the direction of the conversation. Your appetite seems to have come on in leaps and bounds, he observed. Yes, it was Christian's turn to frown, but in any event it's a bally strange business, for I appear to be losing weight, not gaining it. The doctor's face assumed a grave expression. And your arm? My arm? I cannot help but notice that you keep touching your forearm, and not without discomfort. Christian was surprised in having his attention brought to it. Oh, that? Flea bites, I believe. I was down by the stables and assume I was bitten by fleas, either from the manure or Mr. Klook. But there is rather a nasty rash to go with them. May I see it? The doctor inquired, rising to his feet. Christian rolled back his shirt sleeve. The doctor's face grew very dark. Just the 2 fleas, was it? Apparently so, and they must have been blood-sucking monsters, but it's the rash that is so damned irritating. Keep it covered, the doctor advised, turning away. I will prepare an ointment and bring it over in the morning. Now I think you would be best put to heading home. Snow is forecast, I believe. Christian felt as though he was being summarily dismissed, but was not complaining. On the road home, the first few snowflakes began to fall, and soon there was a white film underfoot. It was a short journey, and Christian was not unduly concerned. His only real anxiety was as to when he would see the great dark man once more. And so it was with an inestimable feeling of joy, as he turned the country lane and approached the stile, he saw the handsome and unmistakable figure standing erect and awaiting him. As soon as their eyes locked, Perry ran towards him, and throwing decorum to the winter winds, he grabbed Christian, hugged him, kissed him, and fondled him like a long-lost brother. I was sure you'd pass this way tonight, he cried. How sure? Christian inquired. Just sure. Perry hugged him tighter. I've been so lonely since I saw you. I know, Christian replied. But I don't understand how a chap as admirable, as beauteous as you could ever want for company. Perry released his hold and turned away and clenched his fists. Because I live the life of a damn recluse. Oh, if only you could understand. Then educate me, Christian replied softly. It is due to my malady. I don't expect you have ever heard of it, few have, but I suffer from a severe form of genetic disorder known to the medical elite as xeroderma pigmentosum. Don't look so perplexed, my friend. It simply and cruelly means I have extreme sensitivity to sunlight. In my case, it could literally kill. I cannot leave the house in daylight hours, but am forced to roam the night in solitude. And was it always so? It developed in childhood and grew steadily worse until here I am. Christian reached out a hand and touched Perry's arm, causing him to turn and see the tears in his own dear eyes. Then I will stay with you for an hour or two, for I know only too well how it feels to be alone in this world, my friend. By the time Christian had finally trudged home, the snow lay ankle deep. No sooner was he in his nightshirt and under the covers than he fell into an exhausted sleep, but it was to be a sleep that held no rest. Two phantom figures were engaged in hot pursuit, one after the other. With a growing sense of terror, Christian realized the phantoms were of Dr. Lovelady chasing a frantic peregrine falcon who soared like a spring-heeled jack over stile after stile in order to evade capture. Christian awoke to a cacophony of sound, wondering if he were in bed or bedlam. No, mother, no, he heard Perry cry, and opening his eyes turned to see in the dim light a frantic Perry to his left, arms outstretched in protest. He turned swiftly in the direction indicated, and to his utter shock and revulsion saw Mrs. Hatchett kneeling beside the bed, her cadaverous eyes gleaming, her festering fangs buried bone deep into his forearm, blood spurting over her hideously gleeful face. Out of my way, Perry, out of my way, boomed Dr. Lovelady as he barged into the room like a raging bull, elbowing Perry to one side. He plucked the silver cap from his swagger stick and, darting forward, plunged the finely chiselled point into the chest of an otherwise occupied Mrs. Hatchett. With superhuman strength he rammed the full length through her chest cavity until it emerged out of the back of her dress. Thus impaled, she released her bloody fangs and collapsed back with a shriek of horror, the like of which Christian had never heard before, and prayed he never would again. The doctor dropped to his knees beside the gruesome corpse and muttered, "Poor, poor Gwen." In the momentary silence that followed, the cock crowed. The doctor swung his head round. Oh no, oh dear God, no. But too late. The first rays of sunlight shone through the open curtains, and magnified by the glass struck Perry full in the face. His beautiful visage immediately began to blister, and as his hands attempted to cover it, they blistered also, as if seared by flame, and he howled in utter agony. Without thinking, Christian leapt from his bed, flung the eiderdown over Perry, and bundled him into the back of his wardrobe, slamming the door shut. "You saved his life," said the doctor. "'Tis a life worth saving," Christian replied, then became distracted by the sight over the doctor's shoulders. For as the sun rays fell upon the remains of one Mrs. Gwendolen Hatchett, she was fast transforming into little more than a heap of dust and ash. There are doubtless those among you who are keen to know what came to pass thereafter. Let me not keep you in further suspense. Dr. Lovelady attended to Christian and Perry's wounds and nursed them back to full vigour. Blackout curtains were installed throughout Airybush Farm, and the three formed a menage of intimate friendship therein, and lived happily ever after. It was the doctor who had spirited Mrs. Hatchett's child away to safety, of course. He had seen her turn, could see it would not end well, and he was, after all, obliged to his dear dead friend, her dead, long-departed husband, Ronald Hatchett Falcon Esquire. Perry had been in his care ever since. As for Igor Kluk, so disgusted was he by being tasked with sweeping up Mrs. Hatchett's mortal remains, that he resigned his post and returned to his homeland of Transylvania, where, as legend has it, he wasn't welcome either.